This is the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, all things Cleveland sports, with your host, John Suchan. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Johnny Cleveland Podcast, part of the Fanatical Elves Network and Fans First. I've brought a guest today. We have Lance Reisland, I believe. Is that how I say your last name?
You got it. Yep, right. It's like going up. You got it.
Lance is like superstar. He knows everything about everything. If you are a Cleveland sports fanatic, like some of us here, Lance he's everywhere. He was on 92.3 this morning with Ken Carmen. He was on last night on 92.3. He writes a little bit. He does this and that. He's been a coach. So Lance, welcome to the program.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, John. I appreciate it.
Lance, give some people a little bit of background. I know I have a lot of people that watch my podcast or listen to it. You know, they know a little bit about football in Cleveland, but I know you've got a history growing up in Cleveland, and you coached some, I believe, at Garfield Heights. What's that background for you?
Well, you know, as you said, I grew up, I was a coach's kid. So, you know, as I've gotten older, a lot of my dad's wisdom, who passed away a couple years ago, my dad was, I learned the game from my dad. And I always tell people I learned it the right way. So I grew up a coach's kid. My first high school game was when I was 2 days old, not 2 weeks, 2 days old. And, you know, then I got the opportunity in high school to play for my father.
Yeah.
Went on to Kent, was a quarterback at Kent.
Yes.
When I graduated from Kent, I got the opportunity to be my dad's offense coordinator, which was just fantastic. I was his offense coordinator for 18 years. And then I was the head coach at Garfield myself for another 4 years. 2018, we had a really good staff. We had great kids. We ended up having a great success. We lost to Akron-Hoban in the semis that 18. And then I got out of coaching because of my daughter. And I love football and I love all the hours and I love people call it a grind. I don't call it a grind because that's kind of a negative term. I loved everything about football, especially the connection with my dad. But I just wasn't seeing my daughter enough. So I got out, and then Cleveland.com, the head guy at Cleveland.com reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in doing some writing with football. And I said, sure. It was kind of my connection. That's kind of led to doing some Spectrum color commentating. And then recently, over the last year and a half or 2 years or so, I've been working at 92.3, The Fan, which has been outstanding. Those guys are fantastic. And just kind of keeps me connected to football, allows me to learn and, spread information that I have, but also learn information. And I'm just a football guy. I don't have all the answers, but I just like the game of football and what it's done for me in my life. So I love to talk to people about ball, and any questions they have, I can either answer it or find somebody who can.
Well, I think I'm busy, but I'm an educator by day, but my gosh, it's crazy. You know, I call social media la la land, and you're everywhere. But what I love about you, Lance, is just how you are so in tune and understanding of the game of football, and your detail to talking about players, these draft prospects, for example. You've written a little bit about that. I want to get into that a little bit, but just really good information. And I would encourage any of you that follow the Browns or follow Cleveland sports to make sure that you're following Lance, because you do a great job there in social media, and like you write for Cleveland.com. Now I write for Dog Pound Daily, but it's not quite Cleveland.com. So
yeah, it's all good information though. Those are, for me, that's how I've always learned. The more you read, the more you listen to people. Yeah. My dad has always taught me to be the dumbest guy in the room, which which is pretty easy for me. Yeah. The success I had as a coach was really just being a part of a great staff and great kids. And football for me has always been very, very much like life. So football is great for me. And, I've been in education also, my full-time job is that as an educator, I've been teaching this is my 29th year. Yeah. Teaching health, ninth grade health. So just stay busy, stay active, and try to be as relevant as possible and just help people. And I get a lot of help myself.
Yeah, indeed. Now, you grew up, you've got all this background with Garfield Heights, and I know you've coached and you're with your dad now. As far as a Browns fan and a Cleveland sports fan, you've grown up kind of the same time frame that I did, and I've shared a little bit about, my memories and stuff. Do you have, when you think about the Browns, for example, I grew up, my first actual memory that I seem to recall that I was so upset about was 1980. I don't know if you were around then with the Brian Sipe game when he threw the interception.
Oh yeah.
It was heartbreaking, but that I felt like I was about, what, 10 years old then, about 11. And I was so heartbroken. But do you have a favorite? I guess not a negative, but I mean, that is a memory. Do you have certain memories that you think of as, when you were growing up?
Well, once again, if you read my stuff, I always stay on the positive end of stuff, and I always just try to be honest. So for me, like when people, obviously the drive and the fumble, I tell everybody those are terrible things. But those Browns teams were in the position, and and you take those being in position. My dad always taught me, doing the right things. It doesn't mean you get to eat when you go to the table. It just means you're sitting at the table. And the Browns then, I'm a huge Bernie Kosar fan. I've gotten, the nice thing about being down there every day at practice is you get to meet a lot of people that you're fans of. And for me, I get to talk to people that know the game a lot better than me. But my favorite player of all time is Eric Metcalf. And one of my coworkers, Spencer German, works with Eric Metcalf all the time.
Yeah.
It's those early 80s for me, with the Bernie Kosar years and Webster Slaughter and Ernest Biner and all those guys. Those were for sure the good old days. Going down to Old Municipal Stadium was fantastic.
Yes.
I remember going to see one of the last baseball games there before they moved on in '94. So it was that was definitely the golden age of Browns football.
Right.
And very enjoyable for sure.
I think there's a broken couch in our old house with the fumble game with Biner that good friend of mine got very upset and ended up landing on our couch and broke one of the legs. So we always have that we have the couch story. But I think that's the thing that when I talk to Browns fans now, and I'm, going back, that really was the golden period for the team, and they had several opportunities. Really, honestly, that 86 game, I've talked about that a couple times recently about that drive, because we had a touchdown lead in that realistically, that was probably the closest opportunity. But anyway, well, I'm glad you're a Cleveland fan. I'm glad you do all this stuff for Cleveland fans, and it's great to talk to you more about that. So you've been talking all week, or the last couple of days especially, everything that's been coming out. They've been having the coaches meetings out there in Phoenix, and the owners, Jimmy Haslam, came out 2 days ago and started making some comments about Deshaun Watson and the quarterback situation. And a year ago, Todd Monken had talked about it was a swing and a miss with Deshaun Watson, and now he kind of changed course a little bit and talked about giving him a fresh start. I know you talked about this quite a bit. Where do you fall with all of this recent development?
Well, first and foremost, and when I speak about Shedeur Sanders, I also throw Dylan Gabriel in there because he's kind of the lost man. And I thought, some of the limitations he has, if you go back and look at my stuff, I was very high on both of these guys. Now, unfortunately for me, the Shedeur Sanders, people live in the extremes. He's either a guy who's going to be all pro next week, or he's a guy who stinks. And the reality is he's a young kid who's made a lot of really good strides in his 7 starts, getting a chance to see him practice every day. Very positive kid, does a lot of good things. So, for me, I think Shedeur Sanders has done a good job. However, Deshaun Watson, and everybody talks about fresh eyes. I don't think it's really fresh eyes per se. I think it's the idea that there's a clean slate. And when you come in, everything, Deshaun Watson, and the pushback I get from people saying, well, he hasn't done anything. And I agree. He's only played 19 games and he's been injured. And part of it's been him, but there's been injuries and lack of skill and lack of offensive line and all these different things that have happened. But the bottom line is Monken, if Monken truly wants to win and they hired a older coach who believes in winning, then I don't care who the quarterback is. And when they come in, and if they have, one of the things that was, I'm a Kevin Stefanski fan, and I say that, obviously it was time. I think it was time for him to go, but I like some of the things he did. However, one of the things I didn't like sometimes was they run a very structured practice, but they're not very physical. And it'll be interesting to see if these guys can get a true look so you can see who the quarterback is. Now we
Hmm.
don't know what goes on behind closed doors with install and things they know and
Hmm.
don't know.
Hmm.
But the bottom line is I don't care who the quarterback is. I
Hmm.
want the quarterback to be the best guy who is going to run Monken's style offense
Hmm.
and get these guys rolling a little bit. Get some skill guys around them. I think they've addressed the offensive line pretty well. I think it's better than most people think. However, I just think, for me, I don't really care who the quarterback is. And
Hmm.
my point has always been to say that Deshaun Watson has no chance because he's what he's done in the past. As coaches, we don't think like that, especially a new coach. I'm just going to take who I have, and I'm going to find out who my best guy is. And
Yeah.
if this is what the Browns are trying to do and trying to change their atmosphere and their culture, that's
Right.
what it needs to be. It doesn't need to be a popularity show. It needs to be who the best guy is. And it doesn't mean that if Deshaun Watson was to be the quarterback, that's all
Mm.
ending for Shador. He's got a
Yeah.
long career in front of him. I think he was pushed into action too early last year,
Hmm.
and I think he did some good things. And I think it would help him to have a veteran maybe in front of him for a little bit or whatever it would be. But the bottom line is you're trying to win week one. When people always ask me, what do you think the record is going to be next year? I say, I don't know, 1-0, because that's how I think. I think I can win every game because that is how I prepare, and that's how I the attention to detail and all those things that go into as a coach. You have to believe that you can win. You don't always win, but that belief
Hmm.
has to be there. And that's what the Browns have to get to. And that starts with playing the guys who play the best in practice.
So there's a lot to unpack. Part of my concern when I think about Deshaun, you go back to 2018, 2019, when he was still playing for Houston. He was having some successful seasons there. You jump to 2020, his stats were off the charts, but his team sucked. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then he's out 2021, came back through, 2023. He started the season, 5-1, 6-1. Flacco finished the season. Then the year before, he was 1-5. Then he got the injury again. So I mean, I want to give him a fresh start, like you're saying, but I haven't seen him play. I mean, even when he was playing recently, it wasn't. I mean, the eye test was showing a struggling guy who was already older. Now he's coming off of another injury. I mean, what are your what are your expectations, I guess? I
Well,
mean, yeah.
and all those things are fair, and those are all reality, and that's the thing of it. The thing about Monken doesn't care about any of those things, and he's just going in with an idea of
Yeah.
just like if they had signed Watson this year, going into this offseason program. That's really what it is. These guys are all new to Monken, and
Sure.
everything that's happened, good or bad, and those injuries are a concern, and those his ability to move is a concern with those Achilles, and he's had some
Mhm.
shoulder issues, and those things are all absolutely for real. They just don't matter if the idea is winning. I'm going to play the best guy. And
Yeah.
I tell everybody, whatever you're not erasing the past, but that's not dictating how they think moving forward, especially when you have a new staff, when you have new
Yeah.
coordinators and new position coaches. These guys, NFL coaches are very, very confident what they do, and they're thinking they can get something. It has nothing to do with the money. It has nothing to for me as a coach. It has to do with who's going to help me win week one. And the best coaches that I've ever worked with always thought about that. They didn't think about anything too far ahead or anything too far behind. It's just, how do I win week one? And that's what it could be. Deshaun Watson. It might be Shador, but the bottom line is hopefully it's just the best guy. And
So you're not upset with the idea that that Jimmy said one thing a year ago and sort of flip the script.
No, that stuff doesn't bother me. I always say as coaches, he's the guy, he's the money guy. Being at practice every day, he's there every day. And the bottom line is whether you like it or not. And I tell people this all the time: it's his team, his money. So he gets to do what he wants. It doesn't mean we all have to like it, but he is involved. And I look at it more positively than some people do. He's very invested. Sometimes I think maybe a little bit over invested, but he's there every day.
Well, you have a more positive outlook than a lot of Browns fans. I think I've talked about this, and we've talked about it in our other programming here on the Fanatical Elves, that when we traded for Deshaun Watson, there was a certain percentage. There's certain fans. I can tell you a handful of fans and family that will not root for the Browns anymore because they traded for Deshaun, and so that's where. How do you, like, with your positivity? How do you put a spin? How do you try to grab those fans that are just absolutely 110% against the Haslams? They think that they're awful people. how do you flip the script there? How do you do that? I mean, I see how you try to do it with what you do in social media, which I applaud you, but are we just going to lose those fans? I mean, I worry about long term because right now we haven't had a period of time where the Browns have had a lot of success, and so how do we get that back? How do we grab the fans?
Well, I would say this, and I say this without hesitation. And my dad always said this: you got to start winning, and winning's the ultimate medicine. So when you start to win, things go away. Now, for me, I always keep things between the lines, and some of the off-field issues with Deshaun Watson, those are real.
Hmm.
Some probably meet in the middle. Some of it's probably true. Some of it's probably false. Whatever it is, but
Hmm.
there's some things that didn't go on very well, and people who are against that, I'm okay with, because
Yeah.
that's morale values, and I understand that as a happily married man and having a daughter. I get all that, and
Yeah.
that's real stuff. For me,
Yeah.
football wise, I just try to say who's gonna help us win. And the thing that I always know is that when you're winning, it helps with all those other issues. And when you're losing, it kind of exposes those a little bit. And that's where the Browns are. They have, everybody I talk to, everybody always has the same response. And I will never, ever be sucked into that. I never get sucked into negativity. That's not how I coach. That's not how
Hmm.
most coaches coach. We
Yeah.
just don't care. We're
Hmm.
absolutely relentless in everything we do. And
Hmm.
for me, I don't, when people say, I was on Ken's show today, and a bunch of
Hmm.
people push back because I like Jeremiah Love, and it's okay. It's
Yeah.
those things don't bother me. I'm confident in what I say, but I'm not cocky about what I say. I just try to
No.
have a reason for things, and once again, I always think of it like this: people have investment is a big thing. I never wanted to coach anywhere where it was okay to lose.
Hmm.
And so when people are mad at some of my takes, I'm okay with that because they're
Yeah.
passionate. They're passionate about the Browns. And
Hmm.
most of the time, when I don't answer. If they say something inappropriate, I don't answer with it because they're frustrated,
Hmm.
and I get
Hmm.
that. And that's
Hmm.
just how I work. And it's just easier for me. I'm sticking to what I know, and
Uh-huh.
the positivity is how I've always been. And I think that's why I was successul as a coach.
Yeah.
I know a lot about X's and O's, but I think it's more about people and
It
understanding
is. Yeah.
people and just being kind. And
Well, yeah.
the Browns are frustrating. That's the reality of it. Browns are frustrating right now.
Well, as a fellow educator, you and I are both in the same business outside of football. It is something that we deal with in our other job on a daily basis, working with people and with students, and so it is something that we take into consideration when we're talking about football too. So, you brought up Dylan Gabriel earlier. He's the third quarterback that no one seems to be really talking about, but you mentioned him. There was some conversation even today. I think you and Ken talked about. Ken said, "Well, geez, I mean, Dylan Gabriel's not even there." So, what's your thought on that?
Well, as a quarterback, Shador being in the building, the big talk is that Shador was in the building and Dylan wasn't. And,
Yeah,
that's a real thing in terms of perception. Now, it really
yeah,
doesn't mean anything as a football player, but as a quarterback, you want that quarterback to be the guy who's just in the building all the time. You want that quarterback. So it's more of a outside perception thing. But, as we always say in football, perception is reality at times. So that's not a good look for Dylan. However, I am a Dylan fan. I was when he came out, and I will tell you here in the Cleveland area, I'm pretty by myself in that, and that's okay.
yes,
However, I will say this: he's much more of a system quarterback. That's why I liked him in Kevin Stefanski's offense with the break
right,
naked on first down, the ability to get into big personnel groups and find matchups. Those are things he did very well at Oregon and
yeah,
Oklahoma and Central Florida. It just
hmm,
didn't work out very well last year, and there were some reasons behind it, including him. And so he was part of it. Receivers, running backs, the same things that Shador struggled with. Shador just had more impact, in for my opinion. Even though I'm a big Dylan Gabriel fan, I also like Shador a lot. And I thought the
hmm,
numbers didn't tell the whole story. I thought he had a pretty good impact on his team, that it factor. So, yeah,
okay,
I still think there's a place for Dylan Gabriel. I'm not sure if it's as a starter, but I
hmm,
think the only chance he has to be a starter, probably not in a Monken style or a players over plays kind of style offense, when
yeah,
it relies on skill. He's more of a system guy who's going to rely on his intelligence, his fundamentals, and things like that. He's not a big raw athlete. So, but yeah, he's gotten a raw deal. Once again, both these kids have gotten too much criticism, too much praise for everything they do. They're kids who, I like watching practice. They both encourage
well,
each other, and they're
yeah.
positive.
You think about this going back between the two of them. I mean, the whole season was. really an interesting case study. And you're throwing two rookies in there. You started the season last year with Joe Flacco, and then you had Kenny Pickett on the in the lineup too. But then with Shador, were you surprised? We've talked about this endlessly on our podcast, and you've probably talked about this. But how he dropped to the fifth round. I know this is kind of old news, but when you did your analysis and things of Shador a year ago, I mean, a lot of people had Shador going in the first round.
Yeah, I had him
Yeah.
as a late first, early second round pick. But in a quarterback league, that usually means you slide up, and you could slide up into the top 10 if you need a quarterback because it's a driven league
Yeah.
by that quarterback. So I wasn't going to be surprised where he was picked. Now, obviously, there's some things. I always tell people it's at 50 plus years old when I was coaching. You can't. Shador is a great kid and he does really good things, but some people have issue with Shador because he does, he's a TikTok guy and he's a social media guy. That's what kids do.
We love TikTok.
Yeah, that's what kids do. And he's not a guy who gets in trouble with the law. He's had some speeding tickets, but the difference, right? He's not.
Just don't follow Myles Garrett.
Yeah, he makes bad decisions, but he's not a criminal, and he does great things, and he's a nice kid.
Yeah.
And but he does come with, when you're a celebrity, that comes with the goods and the bads. So sometimes the perception of him is that he's entitled. There's nepotism. He got his Richard, and some people that rubs people wrong. And then we don't know what happened in the interviews. I will say this without hesitation, breaking down every throw from college, both at Jackson State and Colorado. Smart kid, never had an offensive line, had to scramble a bunch, and got some bad habits because of that. But he's a guy who can make some plays. Was not shocked that he slid just because the NFL is a very fickle business, and when you don't kind of align with the norms, sometimes you can slide.
Yeah. Ethan Greenberg, thanks for watching. I think he hosted you the last time, Lance. So and he suggested that winning solves a lot of things like you already mentioned. So let me shift gears a little bit to free agency. We've had some free agent moves, and from everything that I've read and seen and listened to you, I mean, the moves that the Browns have made so far in free agency have been pretty positive. What are your thoughts on just those guys in general? And then I had a question about the O line, where you think that's going with, especially like the left side of the line.
Well, I think Howard's a great pickup at right tackle. He's a pass protection guy first. He's a, he's a waller, not a mauler. He's a guy that gets his backside between the defender and the ball carrier. He understands the game. Now, the general consensus with all these guys is they're not like Wyatt Teller and Joe Bitonio, where they're guys who are vertically going to knock you backwards. But what they do very well is they use angles, they use leverage, great fundamentals, great technique, great footwork. And they're really good offensive linemen. They're good in the run game. So Howard, for example, he's a right tackle. He improves their pass protection. He does enough in the run game. He's very serviceable. Then you go into Zion Johnson. He's kind of the opposite. He's serviceable in the pass game, but he's a really good run blocker. Understands, again, when you watch these guys on film, they understand the front they're seeing, where the linebacker is supposed to be. And then a guy who was my favorite pickup was Elton Jenkins. If he stays healthy, not only can he play the center and guard, he can also bump out that left tackle. He's now, it doesn't, what that means for me is that you don't have to reach for a tackle if you don't have a guy that you love. If you have a guy you love, go get him. But there's not a guy you love. You don't ever, for me, I don't never, especially in the top 10, I never draft for need. I'm going to get game changers. I'm going to get dudes, guys who can just change the game because they're out there. So, I really like what they did. And then Quincy Williams in this downhill scheme for linebackers is going to be outstanding. He's also with Rutenberg, which is going to help with terminology and practice for the rest of that defense. So, I like what they did. I like Rutenberg as the new DC. I like Schwartz a lot too, but I think this guy, it makes a lot of sense for the personnel they have. They attack that offensive line. I still think they need to get some depth on that offensive line. They have to figure out what they're going to do at left tackle, but I think they got to go get a guy they like. Maybe it's a year from now with with Warhop, because I really do think Jenkins can bump out there if needed.
Is Joe Bitonio done in your mind?
From all the things that I talk to, the people I talk to and the people that I read, and work with, it seems like it is. I think he's really struggling with it, though. When you go watch Joe practice every day, you would have no idea how old he is. You would have no idea how long he's been in the league. This is the guy who loves to practice. He loves team. He's always running up and down the field. So he's generally, even though I think his body's wearing down, but it's not drudgery out there for him at all. Always smiling. He likes it.
Positive guy,
So I don't know. I really don't know. The signs are yes. But obviously he came back, that would be huge because not only is he a veteran, but he's still playing at a very high level.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Lance, let's take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. This is the Johnny Cleveland podcast. And thanks for coming back to us here on the Johnny Cleveland podcast. I have a special guest tonight, Lance Reisland, who's here talking football, talking Cleveland. He does everything. He's on the morning sports shows with Ken Carmen, 92.3. Last night you did a special show with Daryl Ryder and your other colleague. I couldn't.
Jake Volnick. Yep, Jake Volnick.
Yes. What were you guys talking about that last night? What was that?
So we do every Tuesday we do an off-season special, and usually what we're doing is like the up to date. So we'll talk about free agency, and last night we talked about Watson. So it's kind of just the off-season, and what is the latest information, and we kind of go over it, and then each week for the next couple of weeks, we've been doing this for a week. I'll break down a couple of position groups, kind of give a top 10 in each position group, my top 10, and what the Browns' needs are and stuff. But basically, all three of us are just covering what the Browns. What's the latest with the Browns?
I love it. I have lots of questions about that. Kind of getting into sort of the draft right now. You mentioned Jeremiah Love, and I'm anxious. I'd like you to share a little bit about your thoughts on that. I know I've seen some responses to your thought there, and I've actually brought it up too. We've talked about him on some of our shows already, and I know he's a running back, and I know we drafted Quinshon Judkins, but I'd like your thoughts on this because he is an intriguing prospect.
Well, I never look at when I'm picking in the top 5, my top 5 to 7 guys every year. I don't care what my team has. I don't care if I'm loaded at running back. I don't care if I'm loaded. I am taking guys who I think change the narrative of a football game. So that hasn't, and people talk about roster construction and player value and position value. None of that means that all that stuff means absolutely nothing to me. Now, it doesn't mean it's not real. It's just for me when I look at stuff. So when I look at Jeremiah Love, first of all, I don't think of Jeremiah Love as an old school guy. He's not a dot the eye tailback where he's going to carry it downhill 20 times like Judkins and take a beating. He's a guy that you can move in the slot. So I don't say the word slot anymore. He's a touch guy. So he's a guy you can put in multiple positions. He's a great athlete, but he's a guy that the reason I love Jeremiah Love, and he's the only offensive guy that I would take as a game changer. But there's 6 guys I have that I don't care if the Browns stay at 6. I don't care. I'm taking one of these 6 guys because they changed the game. And for me, Jeremiah Love is a guy that you don't have to do as a guy who called play for 25 years. It's nice when you have guys that you don't have to do everything right and they kind of get you out of jail free and they break tackles and they go make a big run. Yes. And that's what the Browns haven't had. And that's what Jeremiah Love is. He's a touch guy that can do things in space where you don't have to do everything right all the time as an offense. And that's what the great offenses do. Now, you want to go 10 to 12 plays sometimes, but every once in a while you want to get an explosive. And that explosive gets you in rhythm. That explosive kind of gets you rolling. That's what the Browns haven't had. It's hard to be perfect every drive with penalties and defense and all that kind of stuff. So you got to have guys that change the field. You got to have guys that can touch it and go with it. And there's no one more explosive either as a skill guy. And I'm pretty positionless when I do things. And as a skill guy, there's no one better than Jeremiah Love in this draft of getting the ball in space and go and make plays by himself.
I've talked to lots of coaches. You've been around lots of coaches and over the years, your dad. Is it the coach or is it the players? And obviously the players make a huge, like you just mentioned in Jeremiah's case, I mean, they make a huge difference.
It's always players. It's always, right? And people always say, well, coaching's involved. Well, those of us who try to do it at a high level, those things will equal each other out. When I faced other good coaches, and usually when I faced a coach who was like me, whoever one of us had better talent won. Because we were doing all the other stuff. We were solid on special teams. We scouted each other. We lifted weights in the off season. Our kids went to class. We believed in what we did. We invested everything. So the coaching kind of crossed itself out. Well, then it comes down to who do you got? And and when you face those teams, if you have better players, you win. Yeah, and that's the reality of football. There's a lot that goes into it. You got to have better players.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. All right, so the Browns right now, they've got the 6th. Like everybody's concentrating on the first round. I want to talk about that. I also want to talk about the rest of the draft. But at 6 and 24, there's a chance that the Browns, they fall down or they drop back a little bit. But if you are looking at those 6 and 24 picks, especially number 6, there's been a lot of conversation in the last several weeks on and off about Carnell Tate. The Browns needed a wide receiver, but there's also this other player from Ohio State. Well, all the players from Ohio State, Reese, and then Caleb Downs is one of my favorites. I would run to the podium if I was the Browns, and I would take Caleb Downs, defensive safety. I know he's a safety. I know we've got Grant Delpit. What do you think of Caleb Downs? I'd like to know a little bit about where do you have him on your position, and a little bit about that. And then the other Buckeyes too. I'm down here in Columbus, so I get a lot of information in 97.1 down here. They talk about those top 4 or 5 guys from Ohio State here.
Well, my board. So I have my big 6 this year that I'd run to the podium if they were. So I have Caleb Downs as my number 1. I have Jeremiah Love as my number 2. I have David Bailey, the defensive end out of Texas Tech, as my number 3. Okay. I have Arvell Reese as my number 4.
Yeah.
I have Sonny Styles as 5.
Yeah.
And then I have Ruben Bain as my 6th player in the draft. And if any of those 6 guys were available, I would take them. And I think they're guys that change the narrative of the game. Now, going back to Carnell Tate, I have Carnell Tate farther down the line. I don't have him as an elite guy. I think he's a really good football player.
Sure.
I think Tate, Lemon, and Jordan Tyson are very similar to guys like, when I look at my top 10 receivers, I got guys that, they're very close. If you think about Tate, you think about him as the outside receiver. But there's guys like Malachi Fields. He's an outside receiver. Chris Brazil from Tennessee. Denzel Boston from Washington's outstanding. Chris Bell from Louisville. Those are kind of outside guys. And then inside guys, touch guys, you got Casey Concepcion. You got Omar Cooper, who I just absolutely love from Indiana. You got Zachariah Branch from Georgia, who might be the most sudden, twitchy guy in the draft. So he's a guy, easy yards guy. So even though I like Tate and I like Lemon, and I have Tate as my 3rd receiver on the board. But even though I like those guys, I don't think there's a huge separation. So I think you take the playmaker. What I would do is I would take the best player available at 6, and then who do I have ranked higher at my tackle position or my receiver position? Yeah. I think you can get really good receivers on the 2nd and even into the 3rd day, along with tight ends. This is a good receiver class.
It is.
It's not the high end. It's not a lot of A pluses, but there is a boatload of B pluses in here, and you can win a lot of games with those.
You've done a lot of scouting on that, and I've actually used some of what you shared. I just wrote an article that's coming out probably tomorrow on Dog Pound Daily about some under-the-radar wide receivers, and one of the things I discussed in my article that's coming out is at that position, like you've already kind of reiterated, that there are a lot of really good prospects. The Browns, this too probably, that they don't have a history of drafting wide receivers. They drafted Coleman back in 2016. It was 2005 when they took Braylon Edwards in the 1st round. So we're talking about 1st round wide receivers. Browns don't typically take wide receivers there. I mean, they've picked up plenty after the 3rd or 4th round. Cedric Tillman was drafted in the 3rd round a few years back, but there are so many. Like you mentioned a couple guys already, Cooper, the kid from Indiana, but then his teammate,
Surratt.
Elijah Sarrett.
Yeah, Surratt. Yeah, he's outstanding. Outside guy, big kid, long kid.
Yeah, and then there's that kid down in Georgia State, speed.
Ted Hurst. Ted
Hurst.
Great player.
You brought up the other guy just now. You posted it earlier tonight.
Chris Brazil.
Yes.
Yeah, great
from Tennessee.
Kid, outside guy, long receiver.
Yeah,
really
and then there's the kid from Bryce Lance, the North Dakota kid who's brother of Trey Lance.
Yep. Another big, fast kid. Yep. Very good.
So there's a lot of good, there's a lot of talent right there that, I think people that are Browns fans will be like, oh my God, why didn't we take Carnell Tate? But it's like, well, 1, we don't have a history of taking a wide receiver. 2, like you just mentioned, Carnell Tate is kind of a little bit further down your list of take them. I mean, if we stay at 6, which do you think we're going to stay at 6?
Well, that's the thing, and I will say this about Carnell Tate: if you're Andrew Berry or in your Todd Monken and you believe in Andrew Tate, Carnell Tate, then you go get him, right? Yeah. And that's the way it's belief in what your system is and your breakdown and things like that. So what I've learned too is that what the Deshaun Watson trade did, it didn't allow him to go get 1st round talent at some of these positions, and that has really hurt them. I would. The thing about I always believe I'm not a trade down guy, and there's a lot of people who have there's proof that that's worked. For me, it's like trading Myles Garrett. So you're trying to build your football team. Why would you trade your best player and then you're going to trade down to take the not the best player? So for me, any of those first six guys. So when I look at the draft, I have six guys that I love.
Mhm.
So I'm staying at six because I know I would get one of those guys, and I don't care which one of those guys are. I would absolutely love to get Caleb Downs, but if it's one of those other guys, I think they're game changers too. I don't care about position value. I don't care about roster construction. Football is won with better players, and that's what the Browns have to get. They have to get better players.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot there in the draft. Now the Browns have got 9 draft picks. You've already mentioned several wide receivers. Are there some other guys at some other positions that you have your hopes that maybe the Browns are targeting or looking at them?
Well, yeah, I think they need some help at tight end. So, the kid that I really growing at, I'll be around. If you think about where they're going to draft tight end, it's most likely going to be late into day 2 into day 3. So, guys, if they want to go a little bit earlier, a guy like obviously Sadiq, I think will be gone. But I don't think Sadiq is necessarily the best tight end. I think he's the best specimen and has the most upside and the highest ceiling. But the kid Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt is outstanding. Oscar Delp from Georgia is outstanding. A kid that I love, they're talking about a football. Sam Roush is a tight end out of Stanford who could put his hand on the ground and also play fullback. Now you go back to safety. They don't take Caleb Downs. They have There's a kid named Bud Clark who will be around on day 3. 17 career interceptions, a complete ball hawk. So there's a guy.
Wow. Where is he from? Bud Clark?
From TCU.
TCU. Okay.
And he's
in the Big 12 still? Are they still a juggernaut? And I lived out in Wichita for years, and so I was between K-State and KU. So we were.
Yeah, and then obviously there's some corners out there. Mansour Delaney from LSU will be a first rounder. But there's some corners out there. Sissy from South Carolina.
Yeah, I wrote about him actually.
He's got great hips and he can play a lot of man coverage because these guys are going to play man coverage in Cleveland, so they got to go out and get man coverage guys. And there's some guys out there.
Who's the kid from Ohio State? There's a corner as well.
Igman Nosen.
Yeah,
David
I hear
Igman
a lot
Nosen.
about him here in Columbus.
Yeah, I have Igman Nosen. I have him.
Do you have him higher or lower than Cisse? I was
let me get my notes out here. I know they're real close here.
That's what I talked about both of them in a recent article I did.
The thing about I think I like Sissy just a little bit better because it runs so well. Now Igman Nosen's 6'2".
He's a little bit taller. That's right.
A little bit taller, a little bit longer, and that's really, really helpful. I have just a little bit higher. So I have Delaney as my first corner. Then I have a kid named Chris Johnson, but I think Chris Johnson out of San Diego State is a much better zone corner.
Yeah.
The two guys that I think are the best fits for the Browns besides Sissy would be Colton Hood out of Tennessee and Avion Terrell out of Clemson. Big physical kids who thrive in man coverage.
Yeah.
And though they're not necessarily great zone coverage guys, they don't have to be in Cleveland. So they can learn the zone, but they're really, really good in man coverage. I have Sissy as my number 8 cornerback. And I have Igman Nosen as my number 7 quarterback.
So they're right next to each other.
Right next to each other, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So what are your plans for the draft? Do you guys have plans for draft night on Thursday?
I'll actually be working on Sports for Cleveland with David Bacon. We on the 23rd and 24th, we will be going live on. I've been asked to do a live show. I did it last year. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We'll be doing a live show on YouTube for Sports for Cleveland.
Love it.
On both Thursday and Friday night. Yeah, it's a really good time.
That's awesome. Well, Browns fans, we always look forward to the draft. This is, we kid, but this is like our Super Bowl for over the decades.
Yes.
Like we invest a lot of time. I was the president of the Cleveland Browns backers back in Wichita for like 10 years back in the day. And so we have, sports bars out there, and we had 30 or 40. We have right now, there's 40 or 50 diehard Browns fans that meet every Sunday out there in Wichita to watch the Browns games. But when it came to the draft, it was always a big, big party. So
it was the amount of people that have reached out from across the country and other countries. It's been amazing. The Browns backers, and it is the stuff I've gotten and the people things send. It's just amazing the amount of support the Browns get throughout the country.
Oh, it's fantastic. It really is. So Drew, one quick question about a prospect quarterback, local kid, Medina, Drew Aller. what's your assessment on him? Because there was a lot of projections early on in his career, like his big arm, he could do a lot of things, but then he had some injuries and some things. What do you think about him? A lot of people in Cleveland have talked about him being like a day 3 pick.
Well, I think here's the thing: you don't need 32 guys that like you. You need one, and that's with a guy like Drew Aller. His physical traits jump off the board. Now, so I broke. It's how old I am. I broke him down at Medina.
Did you really?
I've known Drew Aller for a long time. He had a 2-run stretch where he beat a really good St. Ed's team and a really good St. Ignatius team back-to-back weeks at Medina. And when he was at Medina, he was the whole show. He was the run game. They were an empty. He was the run game, the pass game, just an outstanding. I was shocked. And once again, the quarterback position is always harder. But if you'd have told me the guy in the last 15 years, a guy who's going to be an outstanding college quarterback, and even though he had a good career, I thought Drew Aller was going to be outstanding. You're talking about a guy 6'5", 240, runs better than people think. Got all the mechanics, can do all those things. He's a great kid, great student.
So what happened?
It just didn't quite work out at Penn State. And obviously part of it's him. But, I think fundamentally he's got to be better at driving the ball, getting from his backside to his front side, and all those things we talk about as quarterback coaches.
Yeah.
But I think he's got to be in the right scheme. And if he goes to somewhere like the Rams, where he can sit for a year or two and really learn a scheme, somebody's going to take a chance on this guy because of his physical traits. And there's a coach out there that goes, I can teach him the things he doesn't do well. I can't teach his size, his arm strength. He can make all the throws. He's a gym rat. He's a great kid. He's a guy he's easy to root for. It just didn't pan out at Penn State. Some of it was on him. Some of it was the scheme and his coaching and all that kind of good stuff. But I think he has a chance to be a really solid pro.
But probably not here in Cleveland based on what you just talked about.
Well, I would hope not, just because, this is not a place for a backup, a guy learning because he could be thrown into the mix here. And I just think it would be hard when you're a local kid playing for your home team. That would be really, really hard. And
unless you're Bernie Kosar, and then that.
And then unless you're the guy, right?
1985, right? Yeah.
I just don't. I think I would love to see him go be behind a really veteran guy and then take over. It worked. Think about the Aaron Rodgers kind of, but which no one does anymore. I think that would be really good for him.
Yeah. So you're talking about this with the Browns and not being a good spot actually for Aller potentially. When you think about the team, I guess let's wrap up with this thought, like with the Browns and new head coach, 60-year-old Todd Monken, who I know you said something funny earlier today about, he missed his haircut, or he got his haircut, missed the photo shoot. You suggested that he did that on purpose. I think you said that.
Well, no, it was Ken does a nice job of making it sound, Ken's the best. He's the best.
He's great. Yeah.
He's the best in the business. All those guys on all those sheds at 92 are absolutely awesome at what they do. They work so hard at what they do. My point was that, I was saying when you're 60 years old and it's your first time head coaching job and you're trying to win right away, all this other stuff, if you listen to some of his, these are questions that successful coaches don't get. And he's been a successful coach, both at Georgia, with the Ravens, Southern, a really successful coach. And some of the questions you get asked in Cleveland right now to a successful coach are they absolutely are maddening. And I think he's getting sick of those, which I like. So when people go, so when he, it wasn't that he purposely missed the haircut. I just don't think he cares. I don't think he cares about any of that stuff. And I like that.
He did make the drinking part of the party.
Correct.
I did see footage of that. So that's the most important part. I completely understand that. So what do you make, like, if we're talking about identity, because I know Ken Carman came on, my colleague Rod Bloom they had their Browns Blitz show last week, over the weekend, and Ken came on as a guest. It was great, and they started talking. They had asked Ken Carman a year ago when they did the show together, what was or coming into this past season, what would be the Browns' identity, and then they asked him that question again Saturday. What's your assessment? What's your take on the Browns coming in with a new head coach, 6-year-old, we already identified that, but what is the identity? Are they going to have an identity? What do you hope it's going to be?
Yeah, no, so defensively it's going to remain the same. They're going to be a pressure front. So you won't see a big difference in their front four, their linebackers. You will see a little bit of difference pre-snap with their secondary. So they're going to do a lot more movement in the secondary. You'll see a lot more 2 high hats to start the playoff, but they'll still be in a lot of man. But what that'll allow them to do is bring creative blitzes, because they'll bring safeties down the box,
Okay.
Rutenberg does a really nice job with that. Offensively, Monken's a players over plays guy. And what I mean by that, if you look at what Monken did to the Browns defense, the Browns defense is a penetrating defense. So they worked a lot on traps, counters, powers, things that allow the defense to get up the field, and then you kind of kick them out. But it's hard to block them. Then when they face another team, they run more zone because they're going to get big double teams because they're working on line of scrimmage. When they face the Browns, they work more to the backs because Browns corners are really good. So they worked more on the linebackers and the safeties. So it's going to be a week-to-week thing where Monken's going to maximize the strength of his players while attacking the weaknesses of defense. So that's why these guys have to be really smart. The offensive line has to be smart because the playbook, even though there's foundational stuff, the playbook is going to adjust week to week based on who they see and what they do well. And then again, what the team they're playing does well and poorly. So that's kind of the theme, right? It's the idea of I'm not going to stick with my system all the time. My system is finding ways to get my best players the ball, finding ways to get my best blitzers, finding ways to find matchups for Miles, finding ways to get Jerry Jeudy, things like that. So it'll be different week to week, but it really is based on the best players on the Browns should thrive in a Monken style offense.
The running game, pound it. You talked a little bit about getting a tight end. That's really going to be something we're going to look at from a Todd Monken offense.
Well, and here's the thing with the run game. And I tell this goes back to my Jeremiah Love this morning.
Yeah.
One of the things with the run game is you want to run against we always call it an equal box, right? So you have 5, possibly 6 guys to block. You don't want to run against a 7 and 8 man box. So how do you do that? You got to throw
Browns
the ball
have done for a long time,
right? So and the Browns got spoiled and it was really a good thing because Wyatt Teller, Batonio, Posick, they would knock everybody down, and then Nick Chubb would make the 7th and 8th guy miss.
Yes.
So that's not how it works sometimes, unless you have go back to the old Washington Redskins. Sometimes.
So what you're saying is that Nick Chubb did a lot for this.
Yes, and you know what? If you go back to the Redskins, it goes back to Nick Chubb is a dude, and he allowed you to do things. Now, what you're going to get with Todd Monken is that the run game will be good because those guys will be blocking 5 and 6 guys, not 7 and 8. If it's 7 and 8, they're going to beat them with a pass or they're going to spread them out. So it's going to be a very balanced offense. And the power run game comes with, run game's always better when big guys block big guys. If you think about what stops a run game, it's usually the second level linebackers.
Yeah.
And if you can throw the ball a little bit better and do things like that, then they got to go nickel and you got one less linebacker in the game.
Right.
And so that really, the balance is, the power run game for me comes down to balance. Can you get the defensive front that you want on the down that you want to get it?
You mentioned Nick Chubb. Any chance that Nick Chubb comes back?
I haven't heard anything. He's one of my favorite players of all time. Watching Nick Chubb practice for 4 years, it was like watching a guy trying to fight off the practice squad. Everybody, I tell people this all the time. If you love the game of football and you love Nick Chubb because of what he did on Sundays, when you watch him practice every day, you love him even more if that's possible.
Absolutely.
Hardworking guy, just an awesome dude. I would not hate that at all.
I was really saddened when he left. I think a lot of us diehard Brown fans who've watched a lot of football really appreciated what Nick Chubb was all about. I have a poster of him right over here. I'm kind of hoping maybe they could bring him back just one last time since he's a free agent. They could get him on a bargain deal. Those just lots of things to look forward to. So what are you looking forward to over the next, with the draft coming up? We've got about 3 weeks away. What are you looking at?
I have an ebook coming out tomorrow or Wednesday. Where I have all my top picks at each guy. So that'll be out. I have, I said, I'll be working on Sports for Cleveland. 92.3 is doing a mock draft on the April 16th game on in North Homestead, which will be a lot of fun. My first year of doing that with all the guys down at 92. That'll be a lot of fun. And then, like I said, then once the draft is over, I'll be breaking down each of those draft picks with not only for the Browns but the AFC North and how that works, and then before you know it, we'll be into OTAs and mini camp and rookie mini camp. So just like everybody else, be watching and hoping the Browns kind of take the idea of taking really good players like they did last year.
Yeah, lots of things to look forward to. I think, having an older guy, Todd Monken, but football guy or whatever however you want to portray it, it'll be something new. And, Browns fans are always optimistic. There's a little frustration going on right now back and forth with everything that we've been talking about with owners and the quarterback spot. But like you said at the beginning, like winning helps.
It's the bottom
We,
line. My dad says
so,
all the time, you want
yeah,
things to get ironed out. You want a culture. You got to win.
yeah,
And that's what they got to figure out. And that's why I never look too far into the future. I'm figuring out how I'm winning week 1. And if it's just
yeah,
Sean Watson, if it's Shedeur Sanders, if it's somebody else or whatever it
yeah.
is, that's what I'm doing.
Well, very good. I enjoy your. I know you said you've got your daughter now coming in the high school playing
Yeah.
volleyball. So it's boy, you're going to be even more super duper busy.
That's right. I'm looking forward to seeing her play. And I always tell people, no matter how busy I am, when I was coaching, I was working long weeks that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
So no matter
Yes.
what I'm doing now, it's always a shorter week, regardless.
Oh, it's great. Do you now you're at the games right now? I was going to ask you because I write for Northeast Ohio Sports Insiders with like Munch Bishop and some guys.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had a chance this past season I got credentialed. I was at the Green Bay game. Was should be at more of the games this season, but are you
No,
in the
I
press?
could go to the games. No, I stay at home because
Yeah.
I work with Mary Kay Cabot and Dan
Yeah.
Lobby and Ashley Bastock on game day. So
You
I
do.
do
Okay.
so in the morning I host a show on 92 from 10 in the morning till 12:50
Yeah.
with Jonathan Peterlin. Then I come
Oh,
home
okay.
and then I basically I'm the eyes and ears, I guess you'd say. So
Yes.
on game day, I need the TV so I can rewind and see who's doing things. And
Sure thing.
and then what I like to do is that I take all my notes down during the game, and I try to get those out before they
Yeah.
get down to the interviews with the players and stuff.
Yeah.
So so I could go to the games, but my role is to try to watch the film, and I try to make sure I
love
do
it.
a good job of that.
I love it, Lance. It was surreal for me. I had never had that opportunity. So I being an old guy, it was fun. I tell people when I walked into the locker room initially after the Green Bay that they won that game, virtually like Joe Flacco I walked in that first door and Joe Flacco followed by Shedeur Sanders is immediately behind him. And I'm like,
Yeah.
holy wow. Like
No, it's hard not
for
to.
a kid that grew up as a Browns fan and a Bernie Kosar fan like you, it was like, oh, this is pretty cool.
No, you stand on the sidelines of practice. You're standing there with Bernie and all these guys. And
right?
it's hard not to be a fan. I'm with you.
I know,
I'm with you.
right? Oh, last year. Now Ken Carmen doesn't know that he wouldn't know because he meets thousands of people, I'm sure. But it was a game day a couple of years ago, and a couple of my guys, the podcasters, Ken was at one of those rallies before the game, and so we got a photo with him and some of the other colleagues. So if you see Ken, you can let him know there's a photo in our house, in my house right now that Ken is in. So
well, you think you always you said you think I work hard. There's no one
really
Ken, all those guys at 92 and Cleveland.com. These, I always say this, these people in the media, people have, I didn't know either until I got into it. Such hardworking, really, really nice, helpful people.
What's your take on Tony Grosse? I was standing right next to him in the locker room.
I don't know. He's one of the few guys I don't know very well. I've met Tony a bunch. We stand on the sidelines during practice. I don't know.
Mary, I know you said you do
Mary
a show
Kay all the time.
Because I've got a few fellow colleagues and fans that have a lot to say.
I love what, and I will say this: Mary Kay is a hardworking person. She's never, people have. I will back Mary Kay. She's never reaching for, people think she's reaching for takes and things like that. I will say this without hesitation. Mary Kay knows her stuff and she works very hard. I'm biased. I work hand in hand with Mary Kay all the time, especially during the season. I do 2 or 3 podcasts a week with Dan Lobby and Ashley Bastock. So great people, really, really hardworking people.
Is it true? Like in your recollection of like, with the Browns organization currently, Andrew Berry and Stefanski and stuff, they were very tight-lipped. Like there wasn't a lot.
Incredibly tight-lipped. Yeah, they don't tell you anything.
Okay.
Never.
Yeah. I probably won't see much difference here with Todd Monken.
I think Monken will be a little bit more open. He already has been, in my opinion. We'll see. We'll see what happens when practice starts. But I think he is a little bit more open.
Interesting. Very good. Lance, I appreciate you very much for coming on the Johnny Cleveland podcast today and part of the Fanatical Elves Network. Fans first. Really appreciate your time. I know you're super busy, so we'd love to have you come back on another time down the line here. So thanks again, Lance.
I appreciate you having me, and have a great night.
Where can people reach you real quick if people want to find you?
Oh, I'm on all the socials. It's just at Lance Reisland. So I post all my stuff on X and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, but it's just at Lance Reisland, LanceReisland, at whatever, in Instagram or X. It's just my name. and check it out. If I try to put out as much football information. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll do my best to answer it for you.
Thank you again, Lance. Take care, everybody. Go Browns, and keep smiling.